So a little while back I did a video where I looked at the notion of Deb and Chris Sterns having no idea that their son had returned to Northport and gotten into the house. And I think I showed pretty clearly that, of course, they knew that their son had actually gone to the house and entered the house. The main thing being that Chris Sterns makes it extremely clear in a number of interviews that Stephan had been on his computer just before he left to head to Orlando the night that everything happened. Why is that significant? Because when he handed that computer over to law enforcement, there was no hard drive in that computer, meaning that somebody had to have removed it between when Stephan left the house to go to Orlando and when Chris handed it over to law enforcement. So either Stephan entered the house and removed the hard drive, or Chris removed the hard drive later. So Chris has to know that. Of course, we know that Stephan did enter the house because there are records of him having been logged on to a computer, logged on to Google during that period of time while he was down at Northport at the Sterns' address. So while we know, the point there is that the Sterns also know that he was in their house, because otherwise there's no other way of that hard drive to be just gone. And of course, Chris even says at one point, when they're talking about the hard drive and he's asking about the one that he handed in that he supposedly found, he says, in terms of the one from Stephan's computer, well, he must have destroyed that one then. And he sounds quite impressed, of course. So there's no doubt in my mind that Chris knew that his son had been in the house, had removed that hard drive and disposed of it. He even says it. Now, I've done a few videos around this. I've also speculated that either the Sterns assisted him with getting into the house, or at the very least they were fully aware of it. There's a number of things that I've discussed over that, and I'll put the links for those videos in the description for this video so you can go back and watch them. But I believe that they either helped him to access what he needed in the house, or that they were fully aware from the very beginning that he'd been down there and been to the house. I mean, it is their lifelong pattern to enable their son and help him cover up his mistakes. And I believe that what has actually occurred is that he's given them some sort of story after Maddie went missing that is nowhere near as bad as what the actual truth is. So he's sold them some BS story, which has made him look like maybe he's implied that he did something a little bit naughty and he needs help with that because police are focusing in on him, and he doesn't want them to think that he's responsible for Maddie going missing, you know, that sort of thing. And they've bought it hook, line and sinker, and then they've helped him to go down to Northport to remove the hard drive and anything else that he did. So I'm not saying that they actually, when they helped him, had any knowledge of the CSAM stuff, or that he was responsible for Maddie's death, because that stuff came out after Stephan had been down to Northport. And I can't imagine, when you listen to the way they speak, while they definitely have enabled him, I don't think that they would have crossed that line. So the purpose of this video is to take that whole conversation in a slightly different direction, but to still take it a bit further. And that is, I have questions about these repeated claims of him. They're adamant that he couldn't possibly have got himself into the house. He couldn't possibly have stolen the storage unit key. And now we know that the storage unit is somewhat irrelevant because we know he didn't get into it. But they were really pushing this narrative that they know he couldn't possibly have gotten into the house because they know that the house was locked up like Fort Knox. They know that he couldn't possibly have gotten into the storage unit because the only key for the storage unit was in Chris Sterns' car, and Stephan couldn't possibly have gotten it out of Chris Sterns' car. Of course, that changes several times, and I have done that in a video. So in this video, I want to show why I believe that they know those statements are outright lies. So I'm going to go through a series of clips from the various interviews that these two did. I'm going to do them in chronological order, which means that they may not necessarily be in the most logical order, but I think by doing it in chronological order, it's going to track their stories better, if that makes sense. So let's jump in and listen to the first clip.
So, anyway, it wouldn't surprise me if somehow he stole the key out of my car, because I put all the keys there.
Okay.
So I had.
Does he have access to your car?
He would.
He would.
Because I would keep the keys on my desk. He could easily go in there.
Okay, so this audio is the perfect start to the video because Chris Sterns repeatedly flip-flops between, oh, there's no way he could have had a key, to saying things such as this. Well, of course, he could have got the key out of my car, and yeah, he could have actually quite easily got my car keys because they would have been sitting on my desk. Of course, this part of the narrative doesn't fit at all because he's actually talking about the key that was in his car for the storage unit when he went to Orlando. So in actual fact, he's getting himself really confused here, and I'm not sure if I personally think that he's forgotten his narrative because he comes across as a pretty sharp guy. I don't think that he gets himself easily confused. So I think that he's forgotten what his narrative was, and that the whole part of this was that Stephan couldn't possibly have accessed the key to the storage unit because it was locked in Chris's car in the car park of the hotel. He's gotten himself confused here, and he's saying, well, maybe he could have got it out of my car because he could have got my car keys off the desk in my office. Nuh-uh, because that's down in Northport. None of this occurred down in Northport. So he's definitely caught himself out here big time. But for the purpose of this video, it also shows that he believes that his son is quite capable of doing whatever he needs to do to get hold of whatever it is he wants to get hold of. And keep that in mind as we go further through.
How does he know the code to your code to the storage unit? Is it written down somewhere?
No. So I was thinking about that earlier. So there's another incident here. So I get a call from the storage unit 2 or 3 weeks ago telling me that they were running an audit of the units because there was going to be an inspection or something, and my unit wasn't properly locked. So the way it works is that you've got this slide mechanism, unlock it and then unbolt it from the hinge, and then you have to push it back and secure it in one of the two holes. And they said it wasn't properly locked, and they had flagged it, and I needed to get over there and fix it. So I went over there, opened it up, looked at it, everything's fine, and then locked it properly. And I'm going to say maybe there's a 50-50 chance I did that, but I'm pretty anal about it. And so I don't know.
A 50-50 chance you did what? What do you mean?
Pardon?
A 50-50 chance you did what?
I may not have locked it properly, or maybe now that I'm aware that he possibly had a key to it, that he went into the unit.
Okay.
But nothing out of the ordinary.
Has he ever gone to the unit to help you with something and you gave
Oh, he's helped me load it up, yeah.
Okay. So he could have the code for that.
Maybe he observed me punching in the code,
Okay.
which is pretty devious on his part.
So, while he's trying to tell us that Stephan couldn't possibly have gotten hold of the key, and then Stephan couldn't possibly have gotten into the storage unit because the only key is the key that's locked in his car in the hotel car park, then he comes up with this story of the storage unit having been discovered unlocked several weeks back, and he had to go and lock it himself. And he's 50% certain that he must have locked it properly. And at another point he talks about how he's somewhat anal, and he would normally be quite meticulous about making sure that it is locked. That's more my words than his. But he's definitely establishing here that he believes that it is entirely possible for Stephan to have stolen the other key for the storage unit, and also watched sneakily and found out what the code was to get in through the gate. So essentially here he's saying that he wouldn't put it past his son to be able to actually find out the code for the gate and get hold of a key for the storage unit and get in. So he's basically setting up an expected behaviour here. He doesn't sound surprised about it. He just said it would be pretty devious of him were he to have watched me get the code. But it seems like this is something that is just standard practice for Stephan. Something that just wouldn't surprise Chris, to the point where he is quite happy to speculate that this is most likely what has occurred, that he's found out the code by sneakily watching while I was pushing it in. He's stolen the key and he's had it for 12 months, 18 months, take your pick depending on the interview, and he's accessed the storage unit. Of course we know that he didn't access it at this point in time, but Chris is really pushing this narrative. So let's move on.
So that was wrong. The time of his entering Northport was wrong. It was really an hour earlier, hour and 15 minutes earlier, and he never went access the storage unit. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, he must have been really disappointed if he was coming to this house because he couldn't get in the front door, and that door was locked, and he knew that that if he came in, chances are he would put the dogs on high alert and set them off.
Okay, so I still question whether or not the dogs would go on high alert should Stephan turn up at the house, because he lived there. The dogs were used to him. But the point here is that he's adamant that, well, he would have been disappointed had he gone to the house because he couldn't possibly have gotten in. So this is that whole story of the keypad was not working on the front door, so that couldn't be unlocked that way. You needed a garage clicker to get in. As I've mentioned in multiple videos, never any mention of the back door of the house. Always careful to avoid mentioning the back door of the house. Unfortunately, detectives never asked him, could he get in through the back door of the house? But the thing here is that he is utterly adamant that there's no way that Stephan could have possibly gotten into the house.
other than just gaining access to this house, and there's no way he would have broken in here, because impact window's not going to do that, and the front door not working, so he would screw blue tattoo. I checked the car, after the Northport police left to see if there was any marks on the door, to see if he was tried to pry the car open, but nope, I didn't see any marks on it. So I guess he was here for an hour and 15 minutes or so before he had to make tracks to get back to Orlando, but have no idea what he did for that amount of time.
So again, he's like adamant that Stephan couldn't possibly have gotten into the house, but then at the same time he's like saying that he checked the car for any marks that might indicate that Stephan had broken into the car. So that's just a total contradiction. He clearly believes that Stephan is capable of breaking into his car, but not capable of breaking into the house or getting into the house. Now, maybe Stephan only had the keypad code to get into the house, and we know the keypad was supposedly not working. But surely there would be a backdoor key. If he lived there, surely he would have access to that regardless. But the point here is that Chris is like, there's no way he could get into the house. We have impact windows, so he couldn't break the windows. Well, there wasn't a broken window, so we know that's not going to happen anyway. But, if you think he can break into your car, then why would you not expect him to be able to break into your house?
I seriously don't know what he would have done if he'd had access to the house. But what he didn't realize is that when Chris leaves, this house gets locked up like Fort Worth, like Fort Knox, whatever it is. But because I never lock that door because it's a pain in the butt to get it up into the security position, and Elliot dislocated my thumb, so not one of these dogs are ripped a tendon, so I'm right-handed, so it's even harder, but I did do that because, I don't know.
So she's trying to convince us that when Chris is there, the house is locked up like Fort Knox. But then she claims that she must be talking about like a chain or a slide lock or something that goes on the front door as an additional lock. She says, I never do that because of something to do with her thumb. So on one hand, she's saying every time Chris is gone, the place is not locked up like Fort Knox, but she never uses the slider. So what is the difference then any other time when she doesn't use the slider and when Chris is away? How can it be locked up when Chris is away if you never use this slider? But note the way she then gives this explanation of why she normally doesn't use this slider, and then she says, but I did use it this time because, and then her voice, the level of her voice drops to the point where it's almost inaudible, and she goes, I don't know. Now we know that when someone is telling you something and their voice drops so that it becomes really quiet, that they know that they're either telling a lie or they're telling something that they're actually not meant to be telling you. But the other thing that's going on here is the flow of what she's saying. It's not just a normal flow. She is pausing as she explains, like she is thinking as she's going along about how her narrative is meant to be coming out. Like she's actually making it up on the spot, basically. So, to me, it's just not convincing. So we're supposed to believe that these guys are adamant that there's no way that their son could get in the house, and they really don't believe that he could get into the house. They don't believe him capable But do they really?
But boy, if he got focused on something, laser focused, and that really at an early age, because we came down from Georgia to Disney World, and he got the key to the liquor bar,
Mini bar.
and he stayed there focused until he got that key and unlocked it at 3 years old. I mean, he was like that laser
He
focused.
didn't want liquor, he wanted candy.
Yeah, but he was.
The expensive candy that's in those.
Yeah,
He was very, very vocal with us that he wanted more candy because we bribed him with candy all the way down on the plane. We were waiting for the car to come to get the car seat put in, jump seat for him.
Now, we've heard the same thing from Jen. Basically, that if Stephan gets his mind set on having something, he's going to have it. He becomes determined, he becomes super focused, and he's not going to quit till he gets it. And then they talk about this liquor cabinet when he was only 3 years old, and he somehow got hold of the key for that liquor cabinet at 3 years old because he was determined to get in there. And then for some reason they sat and they watched him while he spent all this time trying to unlock it. I'm sorry, but that goes right back to they were enabling him as a 3-year-old. He stole a key for a liquor cabinet and they sat there and watched him to see how long it would take him to get in. Because that is essentially what they are saying there. But here they are proving just how very determined he becomes when he wants something. They're essentially saying that when he gets his mind set on something, he's going to focus on it until he achieves it. Now, the other thing that I found interesting was them talking about bribing him with candy, which, in terms of what I'm talking about here, not hugely significant other than that they have been enabling him and rewarding him for behaviours and stuff his whole life. But this whole story about getting the key to the liquor cabinet, about him being so hyper-focused on things, that really stood out to me because it proves to me that they know that if he wants to get into something, he will get into it. He will persevere till he can. They talk about how devious he is. Chris talks about how it's quite likely that he stole the key for the storage unit, that he watched and got the code for the storage unit. It's quite likely that he broke into Chris's car. But it's not remotely possible that he somehow got into the house. Hello?
So we're in the car, we're on the way to this dinner, and he's in the back seat wearing a sailor suit. And I want candy. No, Stephan, I'm looking at the rear view. No, Stephan, you can't. We're on the way to dinner. Don't want to spoil dinner. I want candy. No, you can't have candy. And he goes, I looked in my rearview mirror, looked at her, and just started laughing. And I said, no candy. You know? And so everybody's complimenting how cute he looks and what have you. And so I got to tell you a cute story. You know, he got obsessed with stuff sometimes. But.
Okay, so let's be clear. It is not a cute story that your kid is being so obnoxious that they are pestering you the entire time in the car for candy. These people do not know how to put their foot down with their son. Even as a kid, instead of just putting an end to it and going, stop it, you know, you're not getting candy, stop it, enough. No, they sat there and laughed, apparently, and went, no candy. And then at the restaurant, in front of their son, clearly, they went, well, we've got this cute story to tell you. What message is that giving their son from an early age? The message is, if you want it, we'll give it to you. And I took a lot away from listening to them say that. You know, when he is so determined, you can't stop him, essentially, and that they will cave in and give it to him. We know that clearly he was determined that he was going to get into that house. And given the history with this family, it seems to me that they would have given him that access. Like I said, this was before they knew precisely what sort of trouble he was in. So I truly believe that he's given them some pissy story where Stephan is a good boy that might get into a little bit of trouble with the cops, and they don't want that for their son. So they are going to help him whatever way they can. And if that means making sure he can get into their house to deal with whatever, they're going to do that. Everything these people say contradicts A, their notion that they didn't know that he got into the house, B, their notion that he couldn't possibly have gotten into the house. Because so far from what they're saying, the message I'm taking away is Stephan gets what Stephan wants, and Stephan will find a way to get what Stephan wants.
And when I ask access, is it a code to get into the secured gate and then a padlock?
Yes.
Okay. And only you have those codes.
I have the code. It's in my phone as a contact record.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I know, he didn't have that code. Now I am missing a key and have been missing the second key for over a year. So when they first started telling me about he came down to access the unit, I started thinking, well, that explains where the other key is then.
He doesn't even sound angry when he's saying, well, that explains where the other key is. Sounds like he's expecting that, well, that's just standard for Stephan. That's what he does. So he's quite accepting there of the possibility that this key that has supposedly been missing for over a year or over 18 months, depending on the story, he's quite happy to accept that, yeah, Stephan probably got hold of that key, Stephan probably stole it. And yet, he doesn't think that Stephan is devious enough to get himself into the house. It really is not adding up at all for me.
What about the hard drive?
The hard drive was not used when the forensics unit got it. I don't think it was used since 2020 or something like that.
Well, why did he go to the extent of hiding the damn thing? Because like I said, he was on that computer Sunday morning, and then I assumed when I handed it over that it was...
So the desktop that you handed us,
yeah,
there was not a hard drive in it.
Right, and then that surprised me. And then when I went to move out of the storage unit, it was at a location at the back. And if you've seen photos, there was a rack of shelves. And
Yeah, I was there that night when we did this.
okay, so you could easily slide back to the rear of that, and from where it was, you could easily tuck in where I found the hard drive. You could easily just placed it.
Right.
So I don't know if he.
But yeah, there was no activity on the hard drive for years.
Huh.
So we don't know where the hard drive on the computer that he was using when you said you saw him using the computer, where that hard drive is.
Oh, this isn't the same hard drive?
No.
Oh.
Because if he was using it that morning,
Yeah.
we would have been able to tell through the forensics dump of it.
Right.
And no, it hasn't been used since, I want to say 2020 maybe.
Okay, so it was an assumption on my part that was the same hard drive. But I don't know how he put that hard drive in it, and I don't know how he put that in there. So he must have just destroyed the thing.
Right.
It would have made
Which we don't.
best sense to do that for sure, but too bad he wasn't smart enough about the phone.
So not once during that entire conversation there does he acknowledge that his son must have gained access to the house to have removed the hard drive from the computer. As soon as they come up with there was no hard drive in there, he was like, right, well, and then he pushes the narrative on back to the storage unit, because clearly he doesn't want to dwell on the fact that his son has entered the house, removed the hard drive, and disposed of it. To me, that reeks. You would expect a reaction there in terms of, like, you know, and wow, that, you know, I was mind blown when I found that out. If he had found it out previously, I'm not even sure that this isn't actually the first time that he's been told that there was no hard drive in that computer. So his reaction does not seem to fit. But there's certainly no acknowledgement here whatsoever of the possibility or the fact that his son had to have been in the house to have removed that hard drive. He's created that narrative himself by saying that Stephan was on the computer before he left to go to Orlando. And yet, when he's told that there's no hard drive in the computer, he has to gloss over that really quickly, and he goes back to the storage unit narrative, forgetting that A, it is known that Stephan didn't access the storage unit, and B, they know that he knows that Stephan didn't access the storage unit. So his whole narrative goes to pieces here, because they basically called him out, and they've stopped him midway through his narrative, and it's just put him in a tailspin. This is the way I see it. And so he's gone back to the storage unit narrative. No acknowledgement here whatsoever of the fact that this means that his son did get into the house. To me, that says that he knew from the get-go that his son had gotten into the house. Because otherwise, why gloss over the whole fact? Why change the topic really quickly?
Now that makes sense. He would have come down to Northport to try to get into the house to get the guns. Mm-hmm. And maybe he came up to the house and found out that he couldn't get into the house. Mm-hmm. The dogs didn't go on full alert. Right. And so that makes sense. So that's probably what he was doing.
So that is actually from the exact same interview, just a little bit later. This is the one where he went specifically to have that interview that he requested himself. He has just brushed over the fact that Stephan had entered the house and removed the hard drive. Brushed over that, pushed on back to the storage unit narrative, which then fell apart, and he realised that as he was telling it, I think, that it was falling apart. And now he's gone back to the house. He wants to double down on Stephan not possibly having been able to get into the house, even though he has essentially acknowledged that Stephan got into the house by acknowledging that, you know, well, Stephan did get that hard drive then. But now he's saying that he's come up with this notion that Stephan had gone there to collect his guns because he wanted to unalive himself, but that he couldn't get into the house. So he's suddenly come up with a new narrative to push the idea that Stephan couldn't possibly have gotten into the house. because, well, you know that he didn't because the guns weren't taken. So that proves that he didn't get into the house. Well, I call BS on that, Chris, because we've heard specifically what Stephan said, unless there's another phone call. But in the phone call we heard, when Chris asked him, why did you go down there? He said that he was trying to get his ducks in a row and he was looking for something but he couldn't find it. There's no mention of guns in that interview, in that conversation between the three of them, the phone conversation. So it seems to me that Chris is really trying hard to convince the detectives that Stephan couldn't possibly have gotten into the house. This goes against all the other things he says about Stephan being distrustful, Stephan getting what Stephan wants, Stephan as a 3-year-old getting a key for a liquor cabinet and getting himself in there. It just is a major mismatch. It's not logical. Chris must know that, and yet he is probably presuming that the detectives are really dumbasses. And I think we've seen that they're not dumb at all.
We discovered very early on that if he was focused on something, forget about it. We were at a hotel one time, and he got the key to the refrigerator or bar in the room, and he was sitting there at the age of 3 with that key, and he was relentless in getting that key into that lock and unlocking that lock. But that's how focused he could be. But
if he was focused on something, forget about it. Straight from Chris Sterns' own mouth. And when he talks about this key incident again with the hotel as a 3-year-old, he describes his son as being relentless. He's not going to give up until he has achieved his goal. And yet for some reason, they were utterly convinced that their son couldn't possibly have gotten into the house. They know their son well enough to know that with or without assistance, he was going to get into that house. So why did they need to lie?
It was all about Stephan. When Stephan wanted something, Stephan wanted it then. He didn't want to wait. He didn't want to wait for Christmas. He didn't want to wait for his birthday. It was now, and he would throw a fit.
Once again, they're giving us this image of their son as being utterly relentless, utterly focused on getting what it is that he wants, no matter what.
But I asked him. I said, "Hey, look, there's a desktop computer at home. Maybe you guys should come get it." He said, "Okay, we'll make arrangements to do that." Only to find out that the hard drive was removed from it. I know it was there Sunday morning when he left, because I told the police that after I found that out. So he purposely removed that hard drive. Why?
Yep, still asking the wrong question. Not when did he remove that hard drive, which was, by his account right there, in the computer when Stephan left on the Sunday, and he wants to know why he removed it. Shouldn't he be asking when he removed it, if he is so adamant that his son couldn't possibly have gotten into the house? So it seems, just from looking through all those clips, that you have this major mismatch in logic and narrative here. On one hand, they are really pushing the notion that there's no way whatsoever that Stephan could have possibly gotten into the house, which we know is not true because we know Stephan did access the house. So they're really pushing this hard. But then they give us all these other stories that show us that Stephan is relentless about getting what he wants. When he wants something, he's going to get it. He's not going to give up till he gets it. Stephan is used to getting his own way, and they've also shown us that he is devious enough to have stolen a key from his father for the storage unit, to have figured out the keypad code for the storage unit, and that even as a 3-year-old, he was relentless enough, in Chris's words, to actually get hold of a key for a alcohol fridge and then persist until he could get it unlocked. This just does not add up. And to me, this says that for some reason they are trying really hard to distract from the fact that they know that their son was in the house that morning. Whether it is because they gave him assistance or because they figured out right from the beginning that he was in the house, I don't know. But like I said, there's a few videos that I've done on this now, which I recommend going back and listening to if you haven't done so, because that explains this a bit better than what I'm just saying here in the conclusion. But I really don't believe them. That's what it comes down to. I don't believe them when they say he couldn't possibly have gotten into the house. I don't believe that they believed that when they said it, because the things that they have said show that they couldn't possibly have believed that. Now, before I get on to the outro for this video, I'm going to explain the music that I'm adding to the outro for this video, because I'm changing it from the music that I've been using previously. And this is something that I've thought long and hard about, because essentially people identify it with another case, and that's with the Kylie Rodney case. The music that I'm going to use at the end of this video is in fact Kylie Rodney herself singing. And I have considered for quite some time using this as the outro for Maddie's case, because it is so very fitting for Maddie as well. And for a long time I was reluctant to do so, because so many of us identify it as Kylie's song. But it occurred to me that this is not only acknowledging Kylie's talents, but that I think Kylie, when she was alive, spent a lot of time, you can see in so many photos of Kylie, that she was really nurturing towards younger children. And we've heard accounts from people who were around her who have said the same thing. She was really nurturing towards younger children. Kylie was 16 when she died. And I think she would actually have been honoured to know that her song was being used essentially as an anthem for other children who have had their legacy stolen from them. And I think when you listen to the words of Kylie's song, you can see why it is so applicable for Maddie. So for those people who are listening who have followed Kylie's case, I hope you will understand the spirit in which I'm adding this to Maddie's case. I'm doing this to remember Kylie, but also because I think Kylie would have really gotten the whole notion of wanting to stand up for Maddie. And I think Kylie's song is perfect for Maddie. So this brings us to the end of this video. Thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. YouTube loves that. It gets my video further into the algorithm. It's seen by more people. And of course, please do leave a comment below. Thanks, and I will catch you in the next one.